Hello, and welcome to part 2 of JavaScript prototypes. In part 1, we saw how to create new car objects using the car constructor function. However, each car had its own duplicate honk function, even though each one of these functions has the exact same code in it. So what we're going to learn in this lesson is how to set this up in such a way that each new car object will share one function in space. So let's see what that looks like in the code. The first thing I want to do is move this code out of this function. So this is going to come out here. Next, I don't want to have the keyword this in here. The reason for that is because when we're out here, the keyword this points to the window object. What I'm going to do instead is make use of JavaScript prototypes. Now it just so happens that every function in JavaScript has a property called prototype. And this property points to a blank object. So we have car.prototype.honk equal to a function. Now, every new object that we create will have a reference to this function. And it's just one single function. So there's no longer any duplicate functions going on. Let's see what this looks like in our diagrams. Now, if we were to diagram this part, what we're going to do is go through it step by step as usual. First, we have an assignment, and that assignment is creating a new function. However, because we're going to work with prototypes, that function is going to look a little different in our diagram. The function itself has not changed, but we're going to draw some more specific things because we care about the prototype. Now, every function in JavaScript is also an object. To represent this, we draw a half box right below the function, attached to the function. So this function is also an object. All of these functions are also objects. It just so happens that we don't draw it because we don't care what's inside that function. In this case, we do care because we are working with its prototype. Now notice that we have car.prototype. That dot means that prototype is a property of car. So down here, every function in JavaScript has a property called prototype. And that always points to a blank object. So we have prototype pointing to this blank object. So all of this is going to be the right side of this assignment. The left side is simple. It is simply var car pointing to this function. So next we have a second assignment. Now we do the right side before the left. So what we need to do is create a function. And then set the left side to point to this function. Now, even though this function technically also has a prototype that points to another object, we're not going to draw it because we are not worrying about that prototype. So we're going to leave it blank. So this is the right side of the equal sign. All of this right here. Next, we're going to make the left side point to this function. Now JavaScript reads from left to right. Whenever we have dot syntaxes, it's going to see car first, then prototype, and then honk. When JavaScript sees the variable car, it looks for the variable car in space. When it finds it, it follows the arrow to see that this function is the value of that variable. Next, we have prototype. Dot prototype means to look for a property called prototype. It finds it, follows the arrow, and it knows that this object is the value of car.prototype. So now we are here. Next we have dot honk. Dot honk equals. So that means we are going to create a new property called honk because of that equal sign and make it point to the right side, which is this function. So that is it for that second assignment. This diagram right here is all of this right here. So if we were to stop, this is all we would have. Next, we're going to draw out what happens when we do var Honda equals new car. Now here's the second part of the new stuff. Normally, when you have the keyword new, I've told you that it does two things. The first thing it does is it creates a new object. keyword new. The second thing I told you it does is that it calls the constructor function. The second part is important because when it calls the constructor function, it changes the value of this to point to the new object being created. Today, because we're working with prototypes, we have to know this secret intermediary step. So now there are not 2 steps that we want to worry about, but 3. This second step is what links the new object to the constructor's prototype. So the keyword new, right after it creates a new object, it creates a secret link to the constructor's prototype. So let's see that in action. This secret link is not accessible via JavaScript. There are ways to detect it, but you cannot access it and you cannot change it. So let's see what happens when we do new car with these 2 arguments. So the keyword new is going to do these 3 things. It's going to first create, oh whoops, I forgot this arrow. It's going to first create a new object. Next, it's going to create a secret link to the constructor's prototype. What does that mean? Well, first, we have to figure out what the constructor's prototype is. So car is pointing to this function. So this function is the constructor. However, we don't want the constructor, we want the constructor's prototype. So we find that property called prototype, follow it, and now we know that this object is this constructor's prototype. So we're going to create a secret link to the constructor's prototype. So this new object receives a secret link, and that secret link will point directly to this object. We will see why that's important in a little bit. Next, it calls the constructor. Next, we set up the arguments. Next, we set up the parameters. Now that we set that up, we can start doing the inside of the function. Once again, the keyword this is going to point to this new object that just got created. The reason for that is because we're using the keyword new. So let's assign these properties. Color is going to point to black, and sound is going to point to meep. And that's all our constructor function does. Next we have var Honda pointing to that new object. After that, the dream space goes away, which means the local variables all disappear. So at this point, we have an object with only two properties, as opposed to last time, which had three properties. The difference is that we now have a secret link pointing to this prototype. So what does this mean? Well, now that whenever we do Honda.honk, JavaScript is going to treat it a little differently. As usual, JavaScript reads from left to right. So when JavaScript sees Honda, it's going to look for the variable Honda, follow it, and discover that this object is the value of Honda. But here's where it changes. .honk means to look for a property called honk. However, there is no property called honk for this object. So JavaScript cannot find a property called honk in this object. But now that there's a secret link, JavaScript will use that secret link, follow it, and then look for a property called honk in this object. And when it does, it finds it and discovers that this function is the value of Honda.honk. Now this is important because if you happen to create another object using that same constructor function, for example, a Kia, this new object will also have a secret link pointing to this function prototype. So when we do Kia.honk, JavaScript will look for a property called honk in here, which it will not find. But then it'll follow the secret link and look for the property inside here. So as you can see, every new object created with the car function will share properties in this prototype object. And that's why prototypes are useful. Prototype properties do not have to point to functions, they can point to other things. For example, if you wanted every car to have 4 doors by default, you can make a property here point to 4. In code, that will look like car.prototype.doors equals 4. So now up here, if you did Honda.doors, that would give you 4. But what if you want to change that? What if you did Honda.doors equals 7? Well, if we go through our normal process, for our Honda, we'll point to this object, and then we have .doors equals 7. Whenever you have equals, JavaScript does not look for a property called doors, but it assigns it. So this will point to 7. So now, anytime we do Honda.doors, this is going to find the property inside Honda before it finds it here. So Honda.doors will give us 7, as we expect. But if you'll notice, if we do Kia.doors, this will first look in Kia. It won't find it, so it'll follow the secret link, and it will find it here. So the value will be 4. So this is how you can use prototypes to share properties across objects, yet allow objects to have their own properties of that same name. One last thing. If we want to change doors to some other number, then we will have to do that in the prototype. So that would look like car.prototype .doors equals 2, for example. In this case, that will update this 4, and now it's going to point to 2. So every time we do Honda.doors or Kia.doors, both of these are now 2, even though we did not directly change Honda or Kia. The reason for that is because they both look at their secret link object for that property called doors. And that's how you can change shared properties on JavaScript prototype objects.